What is your glitch in the Matrix stories? This'll probably get buried. When I was around 20 a few years ago, I kept having dreams about a woman with long black hair named Aurora. They were different dreams, but for some reason, her distinct face and name always ended up in them. It got to the point where I would wake up frustrated and confused, trying to Google her name and find out how I was connected to her. After a few months, she stopped showing up and I dismissed it, thinking my brain was just being a scumbag. Fast forward a few years later, Halloween 2009. I'm in the car with a friend stopped at a gas station. I'm about to pull out and merge onto a highway when I get a phone call from a random number. So, I stopped the car but no one answered. There was a person behind me who grew impatient, honked at me, and then swerved in front of me instead of waiting for 2 seconds for me to move. The second they got onto the highway, some silver Civic loses control of their wheel, crashes into the car that swerved in front of me. I called the cops and waited at the gas station for them to come. Turns out that the driver of both cars died. It 100% would have been me if I hadn't got that phone call. I called it back a few hours later out of gratitude and curiosity. It rang 3 mails and went to a voicemail. The voicemail said this: "Hi. You've reached Aurora. Please leave your name and number." I've never had goosebumps like that in my life. Called it again the next day because I was that confused about the whole situation. Some woman answers, and when she does, we get to talking. I tell her my entire story, including the dreams I've had. She tells me she doesn't know how I got her number and that she's never called me as far as she remembers. Weird. Ask her if she has a Facebook to confirm if she's in fact the woman in my dreams. I check her Facebook and holy duck, it's her. If that's not a glitch in the Matrix, then I'm just bat crap crazy. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine and I said, "Hey, it's me. Sorry I missed your call. Call you later. Bye." And then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he calls back and says, "Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." Well, as it turns out, the message did not end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to the message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, as quoted above, there was a slight pause and a continue from another 30 to 40 seconds or so with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I've never had with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. You could compare it to the messages I know I did leave, and the two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had gone down to my shop and work on my car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that recorded the messages to a chip, so there's no tape I could have taken to get it analyzed, unfortunately. Also, neither I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky. I can't explain it. Driving home on a stormy day, I see that a side road up to the local golf course is blocked off by flashing barricades. I also see a Mercedes parked past the barricades with its hazards on. I stop, walk up to the car to see if they need help, since I'm an EMT. I shine my light in the back seat to see a man slumped over, apparently asleep. Thinking I've got a few drunks, I move up to the driver window and tap on the glass and shine my light. The driver's sitting upright, unmoving, staring straight ahead. My window tapping or light doesn't really cause him to blink, flinch, or even move. I look over at the passenger slumped towards the dash. This begins to creep me out. I call down the sheriff's station and request a code 2. No light sirens, a unit to my location to help me check them out. Doors are locked. While on the phone, I walk back to my truck to get my go bag. As I'm on the phone with dispatch, she asks me to get a license plate number, and just at that moment, a PG&E Power Company cherry picker truck comes rumbling down the road up the closed road. I move to go around the truck to get the plate number, and the car is gone. I talked to the driver of the truck, and he said there was an 80-foot tree down across the road, and that he did not think it'd be open for a day or so. So the question is this: how the hell did the car go? There's a tree up one way, barricades down the other. It's kept me up a bit unsettled when stopping at accidents and hazards ever since. This happened to me in 3rd grade, and it scared me so much I started crying and had to go to the office to talk to the principal about it. I was in the hallway for misbehaving, and my neighbor was Tad, a year younger than me. Came walking out of class to my right, passed in front of me and headed down some stairs. We said hi to each other. About 20 seconds later, he walked out of the same class, passed in front of me and headed down the same stairs. I just stared at him, confused and afraid. And he looked back like, why are you looking at me like that? I never realized how much it was like a Matrix deja vu. At 12 years of age, my mom let me stay in the truck as she went grocery shopping, as I wait to see an old guy walking towards the truck with an indescribable look at me, as if I know too much. He stops 5 feet from the truck, looks at me for a couple seconds, and then heads back the exact same way he came. It was rather traumatic for some reason, and very confusing at the age of 6. My dad was showing me my home videos later of us at Yellowstone, at an Old Faithful, and I noticed the same guy, same look, same clothes, peering at us on the camera and me through the TV, and I'm freaking out just saying this. At a friend's place back in 2008, we were all teenagers and we had a cool shed at a friend's that we'd hang out in every weekend. It had a set of 4 bunk beds, tables, a fireplace, TV, fridge, etc., the whole lot. One night we were all hanging out in there when I decided I needed to pee. I walked out the front door into the shed and started to walk to the right when I stopped. Now, let me explain the layout here. As you walk out of the shed, his house is to the left, and to the right is where all the cars are parked. Further out your left is empty fields and trees. It was dark by now. The lights from all the houses were illuminating the space between the house and the cars, but trailing off just to past. As I took a step to the right, intending to go behind the cars to relieve myself, I saw my friend's older brother standing there. I watched him for a good 5 to 10 seconds as he stood there just facing into the darkness. He then proceeded to walk behind a couple of trees and cars before he disappeared. Confused me, I walked back to the shed and asked my friend what his brother was doing by the cars. The conversation went as followed. "Hey man, what's your brother doing by the cars?" "What do you mean?" He just walked off behind the cars." And at this moment, the brother says, "Dude, I'm right here." I look over and there his brother is, sitting down on one of the chairs with a drink in his hand. He was wearing the exact same clothing as I saw him in. The only way to get in the shed was through the door I was standing in front of. To this day, I have no idea what happened. I'm guessing I was just seeing things, but the fact that I watched him walk around for a good 10 seconds has always puzzled me. I've never had anything else like this happen. I got my wisdom teeth out in 2000, right around the time that the original Matrix came out on VHS. I was bombed completely out of my mind on Percocets after coming back from surgery. I had awful wisdom teeth, and my mom basically dropped me off in bed and went out and I rented movies for me, because I've never seen it in theaters. I remember being irritated that the sun through the windows was making the TV glare, but being too out of it to get up. A little bit after the black cat glitch in the Matrix scene, I passed out and apparently slept for about 8 hours. The tape in the VHS machine kept rewinding itself and playing over and over again. I woke up and the movie was at roughly the same spot as when I passed out, but it was completely dark outside, 0 time lapse. Completely lost my mind. Started freaking out and screaming because I thought I've discovered the secret and somebody turned off the sun. I remember crying and trying to explain to my panicked family who have never let me live it down. My dad had this little toy monkey that he used to call his favorite child, and tease me and my siblings with it. Not in a bad way, but it was really frustrating to us. We spent hours trying to steal it from him. Well, anyways, one day we finally got it and threw it in the garbage after drawing on it and mangling it a bit. We made my dad laugh and searched for it a bit, but basically figured we'd thrown it out and gave up after a week. Anyways, a few years later, when I was 17, I'm walking down the street in Toronto. I don't live in Toronto, I was just visiting some friends. And I see this little orange object on the side of the road. When I walk over to it, I pick it up and see it's the exact same ducking monkey. It even have the same black Sharpie lines on it from when we drew all over it. I honestly can't even come up with the chances of that happening, especially considering our garbage is sent to a local dump and is nowhere near Toronto. I had a friend in high school. Let's call him Bob. Bob was a very nice fellow, and while we weren't that close, we had similar taste in music and we shared CDs. Keep in mind, this is the late 80s, way before file sharing. Anyways, we eventually graduated and I moved several hundred miles away to college. We lost touch. When I left for college, I had one of Bob's CDs still in my possession. It was Beat by King Crimson. Fast forward 10 years. I graduated college and was knee-deep in my career. Finally saved up money and bought my first house. In the new house, while unpacking, I see the CD in a box. I haven't noticed it in many years and thought, gee, I really should track down Bob and return this. Right then, the doorbell rings. It's Bob. He says these exact words to me. Hey, you wouldn't happen to still have my King Crimson CD, would you? I look down, holding it in my hand. I hand it to him, and his mouth drops open. Mine probably already is. We exchanged pleasantries, and I probably asked him how he found me, but I don't even remember. He eventually takes off. I haven't seen Bob since. I was a satellite installer. I was driving between two small towns in North Carolina, Statesville and Taylorsville. It's about a 20-minute drive to the perfectly straight 2-lane road with pretty much nothing but trees on either side. It's the middle of the day, and I'm driving along listening to Howard Stern on Sirius Radio, when all of a sudden I go from wide awake to falling asleep. Meaning, 1 second I'm normal, and a second later my head is drooping down and eyes closing, and what snaps me out of it is the car bouncing like I just hit a speed bump. But I'm still in the middle of the road. Howard Stern is still the same sentence, but my GPS signal says it's lost. And then I hear a recalculating, and when it comes back I realize I'm about 12 miles further down the road than I was. I've missed my turn 5 miles ago. My immediate thoughts were, even though I consider myself a level-headed atheist, was when I fell asleep, I hit a tree and died, and was now in some weird afterlife. It was such a strong feeling that I drove to the nearest gas station, got out, headed inside with a sweaty palm, and the cashier inside was not going to be able to see me. To my relief, she saw me, and I bought a Red Bull. I still think I was hypnotized by the road and drove on some weird autopilot for a while, but losing GPS signal and not missing any of Howard Stern is completely unexplainable to me. I even used the Sirius ability to rewind, and there was none of the show that I missed. In case you were wondering, yeah, my butthole felt fine. I used to work in a building that had 3 levels of sub-basements. With the piece of lab equipment I typically worked on in the lowest basement, I had the only key. There was a wired phone in there, and I did work late some nights, but not this night. I was sleeping alone in my apartment when I woke up to a call on my cell phone from my girlfriend at 3 a.m. She was in hysterics, asking why I scared her. Apparently, she received a call from the basement phone just a few minutes earlier with someone who sounded like me, slowly repeating her name until crackling and fading out. My apartment was 10 miles away from work. I thought she was lying, but I saw the 3 a.m. call from the basement phone logged on her call myself. It still freaks me the duck out to this day. My friend used to put up a reoccurring away message back in the day when everybody had AIM. She was a Beatles superfan and put up a sentiment from John and Yoko, Acorns for Peace. Well, one day I was walking around my college campus thinking about it, but failing to remember the full quote. In my mind, I kept thinking, something for peace, what the heck is that away message? Right then, some chick on a cell phone walks to me and screams, Acorns! I realized this is not a super freaky story, but it made my day at the time. It's not every day someone screams out acorns in public, in your vicinity at the exact right time. I can't remember the occasion, but my mother and I had gone to A&W for lunch, and we're both sitting there eating our meals. We happened to be seated pretty close to the washroom doors, so I noticed everything going in and out. First person to come out was this old man who's kind of hobbling about. He walked past and I looked at him and went on with my meal. Not 30 seconds later, another man comes out of the bathroom, and at this point I get a little freaked out because I realize it's the exact same person. Same limp, same clothing, face, everything. A couple minutes later, the same thing happens, except it's an old woman this time. She comes out, then 30 seconds later comes right out of the bathroom again. My mom took a look at me and said, "You look like you're seeing a ghost." I just kind of stammered a bit when I wrote it off as me being crazy. This is what happened when I was 9 years old, but I can still remember it very, very vividly. We were visiting family in Nevada with my dad, and they lived out in a very dry area in a fairly good-sized trailer. A couple days in, I was playing outside with my cousin, pretty much just messing around in the dirt. At some point, I look up. Right next to the house is a field, I guess, surrounded by wire fence, probably originally for livestock. Anyways, there's this guy standing there. This is a good 300 or so feet away, so I can't really see him clearly. Cue the weird. As soon as I look at this guy, I have what I can say is only described as an out-of-body experience. My body pretty much just went into lockdown, and I was no longer seeing through my eyes. And I wasn't just floating there or anything. I was in that man's body. Through his eyes, I could see two little shapes playing across the field, but I could just feel that he saw the shapes as animals. And then I realized he was holding a freaking shotgun. After I regained my body and blurted out, "We have to go inside," offering no explanation to my cousin who thought I was nuts. I didn't tell anyone because I just didn't know how to express it to other people. I've only since told my brothers, but I don't think they really believe me. It still freaks me out when I think about it today, because it's the only time I've ever lost control of my body. It was almost like a dream, but the whole thing felt like it was happening in slow motion. I used to work in music and toured with this band. The guitarist, Josh, of the band's best friend, Matt, died a couple years back. He always talked about the kid and seemed like he was a great guy. Josh always had this reoccurring dream where Matt was standing on this abandoned street, which supposedly was metaphorical for purgatory. Josh had all these conversations with Matt in these dreams, and because he had an overdose unexpectedly, he felt like his spirit was not able to move on. At the end of the dream, Matt would take a bulb from the streetlight on the street that they were standing on in the middle of. Josh described these dreams in extreme detail, and I could pretty much picture what the street looked like. Fast forward now, 6 months. We're still touring with these guys 6 months later, and they were huge Bright Eyes fans and wanted to stop in Casadega. Bright Eyes Singers wrote an album there, and it's really creepy spiritual medium place. It might be worth noting that 6 out of the 7 people I was with are all atheists. So, we drive into Casadega around 3 a.m. and drive around. Suddenly, this big black dog comes in the middle of the road and just stops and looks at us. The guys in this band were weird as duck, and were saying things like, "Follow that dog, it's trying to show us something." And in my mind, I'm just thinking, these dudes are idiots. So, we followed the dog for a few blocks as it was walking pretty slowly. All of a sudden, we turn a street and the dog bolts. We try to speed up, but Josh says, Stop the ducking van. This is it. We're all confused, and he gets out of the van and looks around. This is it. This is the street of my dreams. We hang out for about 15 minutes, and from the way he described the street, from having houses on the left to the park to the right, it was definitely the street. As we get in the van, a street light goes off and we just drive off. He claims he's never had any more dreams about it, and, well, that was the closure of everything.